Hey, it's Chris, Liege Games. What are we talking about today? 2 games from Bitewing. They sent them prototypes. Talk about. Let's go. What do you need to know? Bebop and Rocksteady. No, just kidding. It's Cat Blues. But let's go, right? Bebop. A light style, tile laying, Knizia-esque, give you heavy vibes of things like Babylonia or Blue Lagoon with a different dice seated mechanic. We'll explain. We'll go into it. You know that's why I've got it set up in front of me. And then we will talk about Cat Blues, actually a Knizia game, and a remake of a previous one, 2 to 4 players. Sort of like if Scout met Trick Taking, if you're familiar. Intrigued? Let's go. Sun's out, guns out. Got to take the sweatshirt off for this one. So, what do we got going on with Bebop here? Well, Bebop is, well, a tile laying in the form of hexagonal seats. And what you've got on the board here in front of you is what the end game of a 2-player looks like. Very reminiscent of, as I previously mentioned, Babylonia. It's Babylonia with a dual twist because you're going to be placing the little hexes as well as the little dice on them. Because you're going to be trying to gather, seat, or entertain the most that you can. You're going to be scoring couple different ways during the game as well as the end game to end up, well, right, like most games, end up with the most points. So how do you do that? Do colors matter? Yes, they do. Where they're placed, who places them, but also how many groupings you can see. Because as you're looking at this board, you can see that there are several different color groupings as a whole, but all of them are not created equal. And that's where the tricky stance and divisive point is going to be a little bit for people. Because this is, although basically like Babylonia in the sense where you are laying these down, this is very reminiscent of any of those tile layers because there's only, as we go, 2 basic actions that you're taking. One of them is just solely to lay one of these down on any spot that you can. And you'll notice on this board that some of these spots actually have stars. VIP spots, as they like to say, right? Anyway, I was going to say something quippy about me not being a VIP. We're holding that off for later in the video. But then you also have just the regular spots there. And most of these seats that you have are just going to be regular ones. They're going to look very similar on both sides. But occasionally, you will have 5 of your 16 total seats that you're going to be placing little other symbols on the back of them. And these little symbols will designate what special slight twist of their seating arrangement that you can do. And if you don't want to use it or can't use it, well, you just flip it over to the other side and it becomes a regular one. So no big deal. So again, the premise is very simple. You either place one of these little things on a hex that's available to you wherever you want, or you place one of your dice in one of your seats. That's all it is, folks. It's just place one or place the other. There's some nuance. There's strategy. There's also some potential, well, meanness. This is a mean game. This is a potentially mean game. Because you're sort of marking your territory. Insert, funny joke about animals and doing such, or board gamers and doing such. I had a few in the comment section this past week really let me know they were marking their territory. Anyway, sorry, side tangent. So what you're doing, though, as a whole, is you're using those 2 ways to make groupings of colors as well as symbols potentially in those families of colors as you go along. They're also going to be slowly surrounding, as you can see, the band markers, which are on stages here, if we pull one of them off. And you can see that these stages actually go from anywhere between a 1 to 2 to actually even a 3 size down here, just out of camera. And so as you surround them, Babylonia style, then when they're completely surrounded, we'll talk about the twist that goes along it within a second, then you score them. And you score based on the most of whoever has any of these symbols. So as a caveat here, you can't have duplicate of these 3 on any one that has 3 spaces. So then After that, just like with the 2, can't have duplicate, the 1s can go anywhere. So how you score these, though, is going to be slightly different. That's going to be a little bit reminiscent of more of a Cascadero if you saw that game. But again, not really quite the comparison I'm going for here, because as we slide the board up, you can see in the lower left-hand corner, we have a track here. And this track shifts, move the dice out of the way, as you score. The more of them that you score off of these areas, then the value actually goes down. So you want to score them right away, but you also want to have enough around to win it. So how do you push it? And the twist of the surrounding, right, is you'll notice that a lot of these, stages have VIP spots next to them. And here's the twist. Here's the trick. Here's the point that's going to potentially confound you. If you're not paying attention in this game, it is going to drive you crazy. This is an attention to detail tile layer in that sense, because the stages only need to be surrounded with the regular spots. You'll notice after I fixed the board, because it got knocked earlier, that this 3 over here actually has 1 star space left open. VIPs don't need to be filled. Only the regular hexes. And so if you're not paying close enough attention to how many regular hexes are around some of the stages, whoops, missed that, is potentially something that could happen in the game. And it definitely happened in our first game, where we said, ooh, oh, that only needs 1 more to fill up. Or, oh, crap, you just filled that one up, but I didn't know. I was actually going to connect these colors over here. I was going to make this family a little bit larger. I was going to have a bigger extension, because when you're scoring, if these are in this area, right, with all 3 of these, if I can find the other correct symbol here, you look at the ones that are touching in the family. So you base it, though, off of the family, but then who's got the most in that family in the first place, right? So I've got 3 trumpets, not only that are accessible next to it, but I've got 3 that are within that family. And so that's the trick of how you're dual scoring there in terms of finding out who has the majority, because that's where the scoring down here comes in. And again, as you're taking them off, this is actually going to get lower and lower and lower. So how do you prioritize? Because this game also makes it very clear, you will not pull all of these off the stages. You cannot, you will not, it's not happening. So how do you strategically, based on what your other opponents are doing and placing, maneuver around? Because you can just place anywhere. Now, you're going to look at this board and go, Chris, what's going on with the board? Otherwise, well, just like Babylonia, you've got sectioned in terms of player count. And so you can see this white line here is designated the 2-player. And then if you look very closely, there's a 3-player there. And then there is a 4-player line right over here. And so this board would just expand. So if you like that dynamic, it's there. And again, the spatial involvement is going to be different every game because of the order in which you lay. Now, I haven't really gone back to the 2 main mechanisms of, action in the game as a whole, right? The seat filling, as I've sort of alluded to, is just place it wherever's eligible. The dice, slightly different, because at the top of the board here, you'll see that I have a little pool. And again, this is based on player count. 2-player, 3-player, 4. So 4, 5, and 6 dice are going to be allocated at any one point. And what you do is you constantly refill that, because the action is, well, you play a dice, but then you automatically have to refill. And the 2 choices that you have to refill are the bank, the market that's out here, that is rolled and going to be set out in the first place, waiting for you to choose one, or you draw one randomly from the bag that then you thus get to roll. But you do not necessarily get to manipulate it when you grab it. And therein lies the other mix and match, because the only way you're going to get to re-roll those in your possession is when you place a seat. So you kind of got to balance out those actions, and it forces you to, thankfully as well, because you can't have more than 3 of these little hexes open at any one time. Once you have 3, your next action has to be placing a die, and you can have 3 dice in your possession. So you have a little bit of mitigation there. The biggest downside, if you're not a fan of this, is, well, you can still roll and not get the symbol you want. Now, it's not as big of a deal because the families seem to matter more in the scoring, but it's not insignificant enough, the fact that you can ignore it either. The other drastic thing is, right, like you're pulling dice from a bag to put them in the market up here. You're also just randomly pulling a die from the bag in order to get one in if you don't like the color selection that's out here. So there's not really a way to mitigate that coloring, if you will. Sometimes, as you can see here on my market, there's 3 purples. Last game I played, there were just 4 blues sitting out there. So finally, as you can see on this map, blue got played in this upper corner. But it took a while. It was definitely not the color of choice as you're going along for us that time. But again, making kiwi salad out of kiwis. The last element of scoring is a little bit more obtuse. It's going to take a minute to wrap your mind around it like it did me. As you can see, the music notes are located here, and they were previously next to the biggest color family size, if you will, on the board. So actually, this red one got moved. So this red one should have been over here because previously these were all connected here. If I wouldn't have screwed this up and changed it all around, this family of reds, you know, missing a seat there, was actually 6. And so what happens there is then you sum total up who has the most within the family. Because as you're seeing in this game, as the 2-player, most of these families tend to be, you know, one person or the other. In a lot of the games, especially at the 3 and 4 player count, you're going to have the mixed families like the green here, where you've got a couple whites and then you've got a couple grays. And you sum total who's got the most of each of those. Now, this is the tricky part, right? This is where these tokens that we previously talked about actually matter more. Because then you score whoever has the majority of those. But hear me out. So, for example, gray player over here has 5 pianos, keys as they're called, and 1 percussion drum set. And so for this collection here, white has 2 percussion, and then 2 keys for gray, and then 2 trumpets, horns, for white. So white is going to win percussion and horns, but gray is going to win for the keys. And so they will score how many points in each family that they win based on these tokens. So they're going to get 5 points there because they have 5 keys because they have the majority in the family. So you'll do the same thing with the biggest one of red, the biggest one of purple, the biggest one of blue, yellow, all of those. That's a little bit different. And I can see people liking it. I can also see people kind of scratching their heads at it the first time or two. Because otherwise, when you're scoring, right, it's like, okay, well, who has the most? I do this over here. Anytime you also, you know, play a family member down. So if I put this trumpet or horn down here, then I score for how many ever total trumpets there are within the family. So I get 3 points for that. So, I mean, there's the really straightforward scoring, but then this end of game scoring with these tokens. And so white player over here actually has, as you can see down here, 2 trumpets and 2 percussion. So they would get, well, they're the majority in the trumpets and they're the majority in the percussion. So they get 4 points. They would score all of these. And if they actually had, you know, 1 key or 2 keys right here, they wouldn't score the keys because, again, they're not the majority. That's the game. You just go until everyone runs out of seats and all the seats are filled. And it comes out rather evenly because, again, you have that limitation of how many seats you can have open. So you can't have people just seat saving all over the place to frustrate you like it might happen in real life. That's never happened to you. It's never happened to me either, right? People who save parking spots. Anyway, but that's the dynamic as a whole. Now, did I mention that this board is also double-sided? Did I mention that there's a whole nother board that's double-sided in the box as well? To give you some more dynamic. Yeah, right? Freaking awesome. So that in and of itself is just going to be massively replayable even if this was one-sided, even if the dynamics of where the VIPs are and the stages are wasn't enough on individual basis of how you're going to be placing the dice and how the colors are going to roll out, having 4 boards in a nutshell is also tremendously awesome. You know, freaking works. So pros and cons here. Again, like, I love tiling. I'm biased, folks. I think this is a fantastic spin. It's different enough, but it's also obtuse enough that it's going to tickle your fancy in a slightly different way. The problem is, at the same time, with that scoring of the ends of the families of the groupings, it's not as intuitive, right? It's not nearly as intuitive, especially on the first play. And to go along with that, again, the highlight that I talked about earlier of not always recognizing when you have still a spot that can be open around here versus, you know, the VIP spot that's open. And you were thinking, again, a lot of paying attention because of that. And if your focus isn't always right there, this one's going to be a little bit more of a labor of love for you. If you like the, okay, I just see it, I know, I like the heavy tactical, but I need to be like more straightforward, this is going to potentially frustrate you at the same time. This is a great game for me. This was not a great game for my wife because of those issues, right? She is boom, 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 boom. And when it's that, she destroys me, right, folks? When it's a little bit more obtuse, that's where I slightly have the advantage. Again, I don't pretend to be good at these games, but I really enjoy them. And so that's the dynamic that you're going for in this. The other con that you may not like, again, like I said, you're drawing dice from a bag, potentially, rolling those dice. And so if you don't like those odds of dice, right, you're not going to be able to mitigate that. You can't mitigate necessarily color as much as you may like, because you can have 3 dice in your pool, hand, whatever you may. So you're always choosing from one of 3, and you're not necessarily pigeonholed as much as you may fear. But it's also for you controllers of more perfect information, even with the ability to steal from the market up here. I don't know why I said steal, but gather. Again, it's not going to be as controllable, but as you're placing seats, it will give you some element of, okay, well, I do really not want this because I need to get more points when I individually lay this down to, well, you know, that'd be actually great right there, putting it down there. The other side of things that I can see people kind of being hit or miss on is, you know, of the games played, sometimes those special seats that I mentioned, they're sometimes more applicable. Sometimes it really just behooves you and you really just want to say flip them over and use the regular side more than the actual special one, especially at the lower player counts. I'll say that happens more at the lower player counts than it did at the higher player counts for us. So again, take that for what you will, just because of the dynamics of being able to replace seats, being able to place one anywhere, being able to place one on the stage instead, being able to just manipulate in that way. And in case you're wondering what they are, here you go, right? Place it on any VIP hex, immediately claim another seat, immediately take another seat action, may place on any previously staged empty hex scoring place, and then may remove any normal open tile seat and replace it with this tile. So that's kind of the dynamics you're getting there. And you get your own little screen. I didn't really mention that. It just tells you, because sometimes you want, you know, especially lower player counts, to hide your dice and not let other people know necessarily what you got and where you're going to go, because that's the other dynamic that this has. So does that interest you? Does that intrigue you? You score a ton, right? The scoring track actually comes with a 50 and 100 marker. So you have the ability, especially at higher games, to score a ton because of the combos, because of the sheer masses that you're putting down there. But at the same time, it also limits it because this track actually has diminishing returns, which again, I really kind of like. I like diminishing returns. It forces you to say, okay, well, now I'm going to pivot because all of a sudden people have been blasting keys and trumpets are still, you know, super high, because all of a sudden people have been blasting keys and, you know, percussion, and trumpets are super high still. They're still getting me 6 points on the next time. So I need to sort of pivot a little bit, get more of those, and then lay more of those. So also to help me with the end game scoring as well, if I can group up, majority up, and family up. So there you go. That is Bebop. Is it right for you? Again, thumbs up for me. I love this style of game. One last food for thought here. Here is the other side of the board that you were just seeing. So you can see again how the dynamic and the spacing out is completely different. And then here is the other board. Again, just freaking big and blue on this side. Again, different dynamic as a whole. And then if we flip her over here, you can see the yellow as well. So again, completely different arrangement setups and variations there. The last thing I didn't talk about is a slight variant if you want a little bit more of a slight tweak advanced mode with these tokens that get played on the stages. There's stars on them and you just substitute a couple out. And then when you acquire them, they count for each one at the end game scoring as well. So that's it. Freaking awesome game. Go back it if you're interested. So next up, Cat Blues. Combination Knizia remake, 2 to 4 players. Combination of sort of your gin rummy meets scout, if you will. And what you've got going on here is just, you got a big deck of cards and you just deal out 6 to each person. Relatively straightforward. And you're going to be using that hand to then go ahead, and I'm not really counting, so we'll just assume that that's 6. Go ahead and bid and outbid your opponents to get whatever cards end up here in the middle of the market. And so what you've got here is a situation, well, we're not going to do two jokers. Joker again. We're not going to do jokers here at the beginning. That's something different. So what you've got going on here is you've got a bidding situation trying to gather these cards. But in order to gather those cards to your hand, you have to take a look at your cards that are in your hand. And I did do 6. For those of you in the comment section before you rail on me again, you have to use these cards as a scout-like mechanism to say, I am going to bid higher than what my opponent bid. And you have, just like with Scout, you have 2 different options here. You can choose either to bid similar numbers or different numbers, however you choose. But you have to, just like Scout, outbid your previous opponent. So with my hand here, you can see I've got 2-2, 4-3, 5-5, if I would have organized correctly. But I'm also one of those people here that does the upper right-hand corner instead of one of these. So anyway, but what you're doing here is I could bid, for example, 2 2s. I could bid 4 cards because I have 1, 2, 3, 4. But whatever I bid, if I'm winning, I then have to put down and then I grab whatever is in here. And then that becomes part of my hand. And you're going, oh, Chris, that seems silly. You just paid 4 cards to get 3. And here is the dynamic, folks, because no one's going to bid that in this case. But what you're trying to do, a la your little rummy, a la my kids' card game where we play that and you just go fish it, if you will, is you're trying to get sets of 4. So maybe if I was smart, I wouldn't have bid the 5. I would have saved that and maybe no one else bids me because now I have 3 of a kind. Now, if I can ever get that 4th of a kind, then I get to say 4 of a kind, put it down in front of me. And that's where all these chips come in down here because you have chips that you're going to be scoring with. Because as you're winning this game, you're slowly then gathering. So in case I did actually get a, look at that, I didn't even do that with camera magic. You had these cards. Then I would grab correspondingly to the value of one of the cards, right? Not 4 5s, but I would get 5 mouse tips. And mouse tips, as you're seeing here, actually come in 3 different colors, 2 of which I've had out. So I would grab 5 of these mouse tips of this color. There are 20 of each color for 3 rounds of the game that you're playing. And I would put them over here in my stack as me winning it. Let's say we're right here. And so then I would also, if I have not gotten it already, grab this quartet. And this is, quartet meaning 4. I just played 4 cards. This is sort of a little bit of a tiebreaker later on. We'll get to there though. You go until all of these cards have been utilized, or you go until all of the mouse tips in the middle points are taken and acquired. You do that 3 times and that's the game. But if you want to do a one-off variant, you can also do that too. It gives you however long you want to play, because let's be honest here. Sometimes these trick-taking games, you play 7 rounds of 13 cards each hand and sometimes you just want to play something short. And so this allows, they just say, yeah, do it. Do it to your heart's extent. And so what you're doing then is you're trying to gradually acquire these, get set, collect, play down. The remake version of Cat Blues here modifies it because they said, and they actually put this in the rulebook, which is very, very nice for any of you that are wondering, you know what, 5 and 6 players, there's going to be a lot going on. 5 and 6 players going around, it's going to be a ton. And you know what? They said 2 to 4. 2 to 4 is best. 2 to 4 is best. And I agree with them. Then also, they said that, the optional variant here compared to the original also is that if I ever, after I do my bidding, end up with less than 4 cards, I get to draw back up to 4. Because you can see that if I overextend my reach here to get, whatever 3 cards were up, maybe I end up with this. And then all of a sudden I have no cards in my hand. Well, how am I going to bid? I'm kind of out. Or if I only have 1 card, who's not going to be able to beat 1-1? You get to refill back up to 4 cards to give you a little bit more leverage to even out the playing field, to not make it, you overextend yourself and and some of you are going to like that. And some of you are going to go, well, you played stupidly. You're going to pay the price. But this game, again, balances that criticism out to allow you to do that. You don't have to do that. If you want to play hard rules, you can do it. But that's the game. And you do that until you go. Now, you can only get these quartets 1 through 5, as well as jokers. We'll get there in a second. You can only get them once. Once you grab the 5, for example, even if I play 4 5s later, you will not get the 5 again. And therein lies the quartets, because at the end of the game, whoever has the most quartets gets one of these blue ones. It's a big tip, and you get 10 points for that one, as opposed to the regular ones, which are only worth 1. right? Simple, straightforward. Now the last part, the last part that I sort of, tossed aside and said, we don't want to do jokers right now. Jokers are the last thing. Jokers are jokers. It's freaking awesome, right? Jokers, wild. Oh, don't have that 4-5 that I didn't draw from the top there. Oh, play that down. Awesome. This goes in front of me. I get those 5 points. Whew. But wait, those jokers, they don't go anywhere. Those jokers are anchors as well. They're going to allow you to score those points. But if you're not careful and you use too many of those, you count them up at the end of the game between the ones that are in your hand and the ones that are in front of you. And if you have the most, you lose points. So buyer beware. But you can quartet them as well to get this, because that's the only way you're going to get rid of them for those scoring purposes. So are you feeling lucky, punk? Can you keep that many jokers in your hand and not use them in order to score other ways? To high risk, high reward, right? That's what you're dealing with here. That's the game. That's the whole freaking game. Now, there are 7s here. I pulled those aside, and you can see if you want to throw an additional 7 in there that doesn't have a quartet, you can do that too. And just another way of scoring. But I was a little bit trepidatious with this one, I won't lie, right? Scout is a good game for my family. A couple other trick takers that I've gotten. Ghost of Christmas, overstayed its welcome. A little bit too convoluted. Scout, absolutely fantastic. Perfect combination of two things. And, sometimes I just don't want to play gin rummy. I don't want to play Go Fish with my kids. And this is taking a great combination of the things that I am worried about with trick-taking card-laying games, even the set collection, giving you enough mitigation, giving you enough, I need to press, am I gambling? I don't know. And enough control at the same time, high risk, high reward of bidding these cards to make it just a heck of a lot of fun. And like I said, with like Ghost of Christmas, right? Overstayed its welcome. Just too long. Just, some of those other games. Like, I'm also looking at the one right behind the camera here, Nokosu Dice. Absolutely fantastic trick-taking, euchre-style, dice-driven, color-matching trick-taker with teams or individually, depending on how you love it. Fantastic. Takes too long. It's take too long. The game's just too long overall, right? It's going to be like an hour. This is nowhere near that. Because bid, go, 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 bid, reveal, bid, 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 go, go, go. It's just there. And I was really fantastically surprised by this one. Because that is the biggest problem of getting these games played, is because I want this game to be less than 30 minutes. I want this to be a lighter filler when I'm playing a game like this. That is my biggest personal issue with getting a game like this played, right? It just... card-driven overstays its welcome. You're looking for something a little less thinky. You're looking for something a little bit lighter, filler, and I use that as a capital F, as an awesome, fantastic, not anything else that people sometimes use filler for. It gives you enough, it doesn't overstay, and it doesn't overcomplicate. And that's what the Good Doctor is known for. And the tweaks of not playing with 5 and 6, which, again, I wouldn't want to play this with 5 and 6. I see why people did not like that. And so those elements in combination with the jokers, enough to press your luck a little bit, is just a really cool dynamic. You already have 2 jokers out. I'm going to use mine. Get my points. Get my quartets. Get the extra bonus at the end. It's freaking awesome. So of the two, it's a little bit of a yin and yang, right? Because my personal of the two, if you said, Chris, I'm only going to get one of these games, one that's, not always the Venn diagram of people looking interested in this one, people are going to be interested in this one. Personally speaking, I always prefer this style of game. Truth be told, right? But what gets played easier, again, especially with a family of non-gamers, is this. This is going to be too obtuse, for my family to play, my extended family. Babylonia, Blue Lagoon, it's going to be much easier overhead. My family loves Scout with this one. There is no issue explaining, understanding, comprehending, and playing, time-wise. And so, I highly recommend them both, if you're interested. Because they're that enjoyable. I don't say that a lot on this channel. You know that if you watch. But both of these are worth it if you have interest in them, because they're doing something different. They're not going to overlap completely with other things. But I guess that's the end point that I'll make here, is I like this more so in that sense that I don't have a lot of trick takers that are this quick that with that dynamic. Scout is the closest thing I will compare to it, and because it mimics that, or Scout mimicked it a little bit in that sense, that it just works. And so Bebop, yeah, I mean, if you have a couple of those other tile layers, it may not suit you as much. Now, me personally, again, like my bias, right? Like, I love them all. I have a type. So if you're not that, I mean, compare it to the other ones that are out there. The actions are more straightforward. The dynamic of scoring and dice placement and sides of the dice in how you're shaping and maneuvering them is going to be a little bit more complicated. Whereas, you know, some of the actions or some of the other is going to be shifted depending if you're looking at Blue Lagoon, Babylonia, Samurai, Tigris and Euphrates, you know, any of those along the lines of Yellow and Yangtze, right? And so where do you prefer your weight to be shifted? The front end, the back end, middle? I'm going to stop right there before I get myself in trouble. But there you go. Bitewing sent me these to talk about. And again, now I'll say I probably like Cascadero more, but I mean, I would easily have all of these in my collection. And that's comparing Bitewing to Bitewing more than anything else. But this is going to probably replace more of a few of the other lighter card style games that we would otherwise try and get to. So there you go. That's it. Stay classy. Have a great freaking day. Thanks for watching. Peace out.